So as you can see from that sick epic montage, I played through a decent chunk of Terraria. Was it fun, like a game should be? No, it was not fun like a game should be. I played through like up to the Wall of Flesh, which is the halfway point of the game. Why'd I do that much? If I hated the game, I don't really know. Enemies are one of the most important things in the game. Lots of them drop things that you need to progress, and they spawn pretty much everywhere at all times. So why is it then that they're the worst part of the game? I would say that the monsters in Terraria are annoying, not difficult. Like, I can't think of a single enemy that actually telegraphs their attacks. There's no punch from a zombie, no tentacle slap from a jellyfish, or lunging bite from a man-eater. Most of them just move in a straight line towards you, and you have to either hope that you can avoid them, in which case there's just like a 50-50 chance that they just decide to jump or not, or you have to do enough damage to kill them before they reach you, which can be really hard early game, because all of them have like 40 health and you do 1 damage. Flying monsters are the worst to fight. Like, early game it might seem that zombies are the worst, but no, bats. Specifically bats are the worst. What seemingly every flying monster does is approach from off screen, like, just any monster, and then they just float just barely outside of your reach in any direction, normally up and to the side, which takes the most effort to go to. From there, there's a random chance that they'll constantly dive in and hit you, or they'll just keep floating just barely outside of your range and only attack once you think that they won't. It's even worse with jungle bats because they have more health, so even after diving and hitting you, where you also get a hit on them, they do it more than once before they die. The worst part is that bats are most common in places where you'll probably be building, like the jungle. They come in as you're placing blocks, they hit you, which causes knockback, and then they make you misplace one because of the knockback. Then by the time you mined the block that you misplaced, and you continue building, because the bat stopped attacking and is out of your range again, they'll attack again, and it just keeps repeating over and over. The key idea with monsters in Terraria is that you have to wait for them to approach, like with the bats. The movement is really slippery, so it's easy to walk into an enemy if you go in for melee, making you get hit, and flying monsters can easily retreat if you go in to hit them. It's also dangerous to approach an enemy since they're so random with their movement. Sometimes they'll just decide to jump, making you miss your attack, and then you can't get out of the way because of the slippery movement. No enemy was actually designed to be difficult, like there's no skill involved. They were designed to be random, so you can't predict what they do, making them annoying to fight since every single enemy in the game is like this, whether they're common or not. Terraria is a sandbox RPG, meaning building should be fun or at least easy, right? Well, if you've been paying attention so far, it should be obvious that it is neither fun or easy. Your character can barely reach anywhere to place a block, the speed at which you place blocks is just barely too slow, and enemies are always coming at you from all sides. Sometimes random events like the goblin or pirate invasion can completely prevent you from building at all. Enemy spawn reducing items shouldn't be the only way to make building anything more than frustrating. Fine should be the worst building should be in a sandbox RPG. There are no good items until just before the Wall of Flesh, which is the halfway point of the game. That would be fine, but the items you get in all that time aren't even very good in relation to each other. Up until the Wall of Flesh, I never felt like my character was getting better. At the same time, I never felt like I, as a player, was getting better at the game. At one point, I found a magic missile, which made the game infinitely easier, and realized that you aren't supposed to get better at the game, you're supposed to get better items so you feel like you're better at the game. Terraria has some of the least satisfying movement of any game I've played in a while. Early into the game, you basically can't move at all, and it feels like you're a turtle with spring shoes. The only way to move without feeling like you're slogging through mud is to get 3 items: Hermes boots, a grappling hook, and a cloud in a bottle. How do you get these items? By exploring. You get items that make exploring not miserable, By exploring. Of course! Why didn't I realize that earlier? It was so obvious and well thought out. But guess what? These items still don't make movement satisfying. Movement somehow feels both stiff and slippery. Acceleration and deceleration takes a while, and there's very little friction when you want to stop after moving quickly. At the same time, movement feels very all or nothing. My guess is that this is because there's no locked animation for jumping, landing, or turning around, kind of like in Half-Life. The difference is that Half-Life's movement feels responsive since you don't slip all over the place unless you go out of your way to. You have to make arenas to fight bosses. That's fine, right? Just flatten out a bit of land, build 2 or 3 platforms pretty wide, put down some healing items like honey, block in your NPCs, and you're set. Well, doing something that obvious will just get you and your NPCs killed. Why? Because bosses don't play the same game as you. They can phase in and out of the ground without even slowing down. They'll pop in, make their way into your town, and kill your NPCs. That's fair and fun, right? Building a practical arena doesn't work and it takes forever. It's the worst with the Wall of Flesh, since you have to dig out a whole bunch of buildings in the underworld and build a super long bridge, much longer than should be needed. All while trying not to get knocked off by enemies. All because they didn't bother to have one coded in from the start. You don't even use that bridge for anything else. I understand that the issue with bosses having proper collision is that you would be able to trap them in some well-placed stray blocks and shoot them from a distance. But they gave King Slime proper collision and gave him the ability to teleport if he gets too far away from the player, or, more importantly, stuck in some blocks. What's wrong with doing this with the other bosses? What's worse than bosses going through the ground is how you actually fight them. Let's say you take like 30 minutes and set up a proper arena that's all lit up with healing spots all over. Well, you would then spawn a boss hoping to fight it normally, right? Well, bosses don't fight normally. They float just outside of your reach like bats. No matter how you move, even if how they move doesn't follow the rules set for every single other enemy in the game. They'll just float there, taunting you with their constant retreat, until they seem to bug out and lazily send in an arm or something to smack you with. Their attacks always seem accidental, since they're so floaty and they seem to ignore you while staying so close and far at the same time. Okay, well let's say you manage to kill a boss, and hope to get some kind of trophy that can be put on a wall as a reward for you putting up with the game's BS for so long. Unfortunately for you, it's a percentage chance to get a trophy from a boss. If you really want a trophy of some sort, you might have to kill a boss more than once. So I've been playing Terraria even more. I'm pretty close to the end of the game, being a bit before Golem. Right up Plantera right now. And I can pretty safely say that it gets even worse where I am. Because it's just boring. And it's also pretty frustrating. Because what happens at the point that I'm at in the game is that there's pretty much no direction given. And there's these 3 bosses, but it doesn't really explain how you summon the bosses. It's just like a 0.5% chance for enemies to drop it, which I had to look up, by the way. And you have to kill these 3 bosses, even though you have equipment from pretty much before you fight the Wall of Flesh. And you have to spend like 10 hours getting the equipment made to fight these bosses. Like, I can understand having it so you have to fight, so you have to get your items over like 4 hours or something, because it's mining, right? You have to mine titanium, palladium, and like orichalcum. That's fine, but 10 hours is a lot. Especially since I barely have enough titanium to make just a hat and greaves. But yeah, it sucks. Like, the bosses are just like way too hard. I had to go to my other world where I cheated stuff in. And that just made the bosses too easy, obviously, because I used items from when I cheated stuff in. And it just... Because, like, there's no items between the Wall of Flesh and these mechanical bosses. Like, there's nothing. Pretty much. Nothing helpful, because I have a magic setup. And the game really just snubs you on magic. And it's just really frustrating. So because I have to cheat again, I have to cheat stuff in, otherwise I just won't be able to play the game. Which then makes the game boring, because everything's way too easy now. But that's really the only solution. Either it's way too hard or it's way too easy.